Ukraine marks 3 years of Russia's full-scale invasion on the state under growing pressure. The U.S. is now demanding 50% ownership of Ukraine's rare earth minerals as compensation for its financial help. The U.S. Commerce Secretary asks Korean firms for more investment in America and suggests a minimum of $1 billion in investment for fast-track benefits. Over in Germany, the center-right opposition Christian Democratic Union Party wins a federal election. The far-right Alternative for Germany came in second place, apparently over immigration issues. It's February 24th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon. We start with international stories where Ukraine marks a great milestone, 3 years of war. The Trump administration is now demanding that Ukraine pays the U.S. back in the form of a mineral deal for Washington's support during the past years. Park Go-nu has the story.
U.S. President Donald Trump has sought a deal that would not only have Ukraine repay the U.S. for its financial support for the years, but more on top. The deal calls for the U.S. to take 50% of Ukraine's mineral and natural resources revenues worth $500 billion. But the deal would include not only revenue from rare earth, but also uranium, lithium, oil, gas, and even some port revenues. The deal also specifies that U.S. companies must hold 50% ownership of Ukraine's rare earth elements deposits. This would allow the U.S. to receive more than 3 times what was given to Kyiv for its military and humanitarian support in the past 3 years. While Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky initially rejected the deal, calling for security guarantees, U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East Steve Witkoff said on Sunday the agreement is expected to be signed sometime this week. However, one expert said the situation is more complex.
It's going to be very difficult because Zelensky doesn't have the constitutional right, even as the president in a time of martial law and war, to sign away his country's resources. This is something that will have to be scrutinized by the Ukrainian parliament and the various expert committees.
He added Ukraine has the power to slow down the process, while saying U.S. mining companies are less competitive than companies from countries like China and Australia. Meanwhile, President Zelensky has offered to resign from office in exchange for a peace guarantee and Ukraine's membership in NATO.
If it's about peace in Ukraine and you really want me to leave my position, I am ready to do that. I can exchange it for NATO membership if there is such an opportunity.
However, earlier this month, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said Kyiv joining NATO was unrealistic, shooting down any prospects of Ukraine's membership. Washington and Moscow will also be holding talks on improving bilateral relations in the coming days. The Kremlin said that the meeting will involve the Russian Foreign Ministry and the U.S. State Department. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
Up next, our Kim Bo-kyung examines the current ground situation in Ukraine and prospects over the war that stretches on for 3 years now.
11% of its land has been lost, and the population has decreased by nearly 10 million in Ukraine since Russia began its full-scale invasion in February 2022. Russia has captured most of the 4 southeastern regions, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Considering land already lost to Russia, Crimea, and Russian-backed separatists since the conflict began in 2014, the total land Ukraine has lost is about 18%. Ukraine launched a surprise offensive last August, capturing Russia's Kursk region, only for it to be recaptured by Russian forces. Now, with Donald Trump back in the Oval Office, the war has entered a new phase, with the U.S. and Russia beginning the first step of a series of engagements to bring the war to an end. Excluded from the talks, Europe and Ukraine are scrambling for security measures to deter Russia. One expert says having Europe's own security force will be a must, though it might take some time.
Europe will have to have peacekeeping troops or some type of security forces, however they call it, but it will likely be difficult to form a large number of troops in a very short period of time.
Ukraine itself is working to have a U.S. presence in the territory, with Kyiv to reportedly soon sign a mineral agreement. The expert says the focal point would be what security measures the U.S. has promised Ukraine in return.
If Ukraine has made such significant concessions, accepting the mineral deal, it's likely that the U.S. made proposals of taking on a role in providing further security guarantees.
Even if the U.S. allows Ukraine to be a NATO member in exchange for mineral development rights for rare earth elements, whether Russia would tolerate this remains a question, though its original purpose was to just gain Ukraine's territory. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
During a recent meeting with Korean business leaders, the U.S. Commerce Secretary has asked for more investment and brought up a fast-track benefit package for foreign companies in return for investment worth at least $1 billion. An Sung-jin explains the details.
$1 billion investment. That's how much Trump's newly appointed Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, has mentioned that companies need to invest in the U.S. to receive incentives from Washington. During a meeting last Friday with the South Korean business delegation to the U.S., which included the heads of SK Group, Hyundai Motors, and other key sectoral companies, Lutnick suggested a minimum of $1 billion in investment by companies for them to receive fast-track benefits, including an easing of regulatory processes. A delegation official later explained that this figure was not a minimum for investment, but rather an implied one regarding active foreign direct investment in the U.S. This move follows the Trump administration starting to emphasize an American-first investment policy.
But we're going to get rid of so much waste, fraud, and abuse. We're not going to hurt anybody, but we're going to get rid of it. And then we are going to grow this economy in a way that people have never seen.
However, a professor noted that Trump has yet to provide any specifics on this plan.
Fast track usually requires teamwork from various ministries, various agencies, and it's not entirely clear right now whether Trump and the Trump administration has that mechanism ready. I'm not sure if they can set up that type of fast-track procedures quickly.
South Korean firms now face a dilemma of balancing out operational and labor costs for manufacturing in the U.S.
The company will have to do their profit and loss calculations very carefully. So unless they're fairly sure that investment in the United States is profitable, it may be better for these Korean companies to wait and see what happens.
South Korea's trade minister is allegedly to visit the U.S. to further negotiate on this matter. In addition to their discussion on the fast-track benefits, Lutnick has also highlighted the importance of cooperation in critical industries, including shipbuilding, nuclear power, AI, and semiconductors. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
In other news, this past weekend, Japan ruffled diplomatic feathers by laying a false claim to South Korea's Dokdo Island yet again. Our foreign affairs correspondent Pei-Yun-ji reports.
For 20 years, the local government in Japan's Shimane Prefecture has been holding annual events to claim that Dokdo is Japanese territory. A senior Japanese official in charge of territorial issues, Eriko Imai, attended this year's ceremony on Saturday. The Japanese government has been sending vice ministerial level officials to the annual event since 2013, when Shinzo Abe served as the country's prime minister. Dokdo, located off South Korea's east coast, has long been at the center of diplomatic tension between the two neighboring countries. Japan has claimed sovereignty for decades in its policy papers, public statements, and school textbooks. In response, Seoul's foreign ministry called in Daisuke Mibae, the deputy chief of mission at the Japanese embassy in Seoul, on Saturday to protest. It also urged the Japanese government to immediately abolish the event, stressing that Dokdo is South Korean territory historically, geographically, and under international law. Experts say that it's important for Japan to act responsibly to forge a better bilateral relationship.
If Japan truly desires to achieve a meaningful relationship with South Korea, I believe the first step is to get rid of this absurd event. I would also like to say it's time for the Japanese government and local authorities to face up to its history and act in a way that will not be shameful to future generations.
This year marks the 60th anniversary of the normalization of diplomatic relations between Seoul and Tokyo. But territorial claims over Dokdo continue to remain a major obstacle to improving bilateral ties. 배은지, Arirang News.
Tomorrow, the final hearing of the impeachment trial against President Yoon will take place. Much attention is focused on the president's concluding remarks. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young has more.
President Yoon will have one last chance to make his case against impeachment this week, as the Constitutional Court wraps up trial hearings on Tuesday. The 11th and final session comes 73 days after the National Assembly passed a vote to remove him from power after his December 3rd martial law order. According to the court, the justices will review the remaining evidence that hasn't been scrutinised yet before giving both the National Assembly and President Yoon's legal teams 2 hours to present their closing arguments. Then the Assembly's impeachment panel chair Chung Chong-le and President Yoon will deliver their final statements with no time restrictions. Chung is expected to wrap up the Assembly's position that Yoon's declaration of martial law was illegal in both procedure and substance, and that his orders on December 3rd violate constitutional principles. Meanwhile, Yoon is expected to reiterate arguments previously presented by his legal team that martial law is an executive right of the president and was issued as a warning against the dominant opposition party's tyranny in parliament that paralysed government functions. Yoon has also raised concerns over national security and election fraud. As speculation grows over whether Yoon will present a political compromise or gesture, including a suggestion to revise the amendment to shorten his presidential term, his legal team said Sunday that it is not the president's style to offer conditional measures in order to avoid impeachment. The team said Yoon is currently preparing his final statement and is carefully considering various options. Once the hearings conclude, the deliberation period begins. Then Presiding Justice Chung Yong-sik will present his review before all 8 justices vote for or against impeachment. The ruling will be drafted based on the majority opinion. The court will then decide the date to announce the verdict, which is expected within 2 weeks of the last hearing, likely in around mid-March. If 6 or more of the 8 justices vote in favour of the impeachment, President Yoon will be removed from office, triggering a snap presidential election within 60 days. However, if at least 3 justices oppose impeachment, the motion will be dismissed and President Yoon will immediately resume his duties. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Acting President and Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok has pledged to accelerate South Korea's transition to carbon-free energy as part of the country's long-term carbon neutrality strategy. Speaking at the second 2050 Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth Committee meeting on Monday, Choi highlighted plans to expand renewable energy while supporting the development of next-generation nuclear technologies, such as small modular reactors. With 90% of South Korea's energy dependent on imports, Choi emphasized the need to reduce reliance on foreign sources. The government further aims to ensure a smooth transition for export-driven industries with high carbon emissions and foster climate technology innovation. With the APEC summit set to be held in Gyeongju in 8 months, high-level meetings to discuss the agenda opened today in the southeastern city. Around 2,000 officials from 21 countries are expected to arrive in Gyeongju, which will host the 2025 summit. Over 200 volunteers have been selected to assist, including 23 foreigners fluent in key languages. The city offers shuttle services and designated hotels for delegates. The 2 weeks of preparatory meetings will run until March 9th. In Germany, the center-right Christian Democratic Union Party won the highest proportion of the ballots cast in Sunday's election, while the far-right Alternative for Germany came in second place. Yoon has the latest.
Germany's conservative Christian Democratic Union is expected to win the federal election, positioning its leader, Friedrich Merz, to become the next chancellor of Europe's largest economy.
We must now quickly regain our ability to act so that we can do the right thing at home, so that we can be present in Europe again, so that the world realizes that Germany is being governed reliably again. That's what the conservatives stand for. That's what we stand for, and that's what I personally stand for.
On Sunday, initial exit polls showed that Merz's CDU and the allied Christian Social Union secured just under 30% of the votes, leaving the center-left Social Democratic Party of current Chancellor Olaf Scholz far behind with approximately 16%. In second place was the far-right Alternative for Germany, securing around 20%, roughly doubling its result from the 2021 election. The AfD's surge, fueled by growing public concerns over immigration and security, was accompanied by a vow from the party leader to claim first place in future elections. However, despite the party's strong showing, the AfD will not be part of the new government, as all other parties have committed to excluding them from power. With Merz's victory nearly certain, he now faces the task of forming a coalition government, which he has vowed to complete by Easter, April 20th. To secure a majority in parliament, Merz will likely need to form alliances with one or more parties, potentially including the SPD, which experienced a dramatic drop from its 2021 result of over 25%, marking its worst performance. Despite the open support for the far-right Alternative for Germany party from figures like Elon Musk and US Vice President J.D. Vance during the election, President Donald Trump welcomed Merz's victory, calling it a great day for both Germany and the US. Merz, who has never held a ministerial position, has promised to take a strong leadership role in Europe and increase support for Ukraine. In a roundtable TV discussion on Sunday night, Merz remarked that it had become clear in recent days that the Trump administration was largely indifferent to the fate of Europe. He emphasized that his priority would be to strengthen Europe as quickly as possible to achieve real independence from the US, step by step. Yoon, Arirang News.
Time now to take a look at what has been happening in the world of sports. Joining us in the studio is our sports editor, Paul Need. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Let us first start with football. Tottenham Hotspur has begun to find form again, and so too has the club captain, Son Heung-min.
Yes, Son on Sunday laid on 2 assists for Spurs in their 4-1 win over Ipswich Town. Son is on 9 assists now for the season with 6 goals. This takes Son to 71 assists in the Premier League, and with 126 goals, he has become only the 11th player in English Premier League history to record at least 70 goals and 70 assists. It's also the 9th season that Son has been involved in at least 10 goals. Elsewhere in Europe over the weekend, Lee Gang-in got an assist in Paris Saint-Germain's 3-2 away win over Lyon on Sunday. He came off the bench to tee up Achraf Hakimi to make it 3-1 5 minutes from time. PSG are 13 points clear at the top of the table. And in Germany, Lee Jae-sung on Saturday bagged 1 goal and 1 assist in Mainz's 2-0 home win over St. Pauli. Mainz sit as high as 5th and are in contention for a place in Europe next year.
Now sticking with football, South Korea's under-20 team is through to the semi-finals of the AFC Under-20 Asian Cup.
Yes, that's right. They beat Uzbekistan after a penalty shootout on Sunday to secure a place in the last 4. It was a game that saw Korea come from behind to then lead, but then find themselves pegged back again. Uzbekistan took the lead on 18 minutes, but 2 goals from Shin Min-ha turned the game on its head. Kim Tae-won then made it 3-1 just after the hour mark. But then Uzbekistan hit back with 2 goals after the 90 to force extra time and then penalties. Kim Tae-won, Kim Ho-jin and Ha Jong-woo scored their penalties to secure a 3-1 shootout win. Korea faced Saudi Arabia on Wednesday at 5:15 p.m. Korea time. Australia and Japan are the 2 other semi-finalists, and reaching these semis also means that South Korea have secured a place in the Under-20 World Cup in September this year.
And finally, to figure skating. Medals for some South Korean skaters stars here on home ice.
Yes, at the Four Continents here in Seoul, there have been medals for both Jun-hwan and Chae-yeon at Mokdong Ice Rink in Western Seoul. Kim won gold in the women's singles on Sunday, less than 2 weeks after winning gold at the Asian Games. She recorded a personal best score of 148.36 in the free skate to earn a total score of 222.38. She'd won the short program on Friday, also with a new personal best of 74.02. Cha Jun-hwan's silver medal came in the men's singles free skate, following a score of 185.78 to earn a total score of 265.02. Cha won gold at the Asian Games just over a week ago, and the World Championships are coming up at the end of March in Boston. How Cha and Kim do there will determine the number of spots South Korea gets at the 2026 Winter Olympics.
Right, thanks for the wrap-up. See you next time.
Thank you.
It's the last week of February and the cold is getting ready to move away. The temperature in Seoul moved up to 5 degrees Celsius, about 5 degrees higher than yesterday. Tomorrow will be a bit milder than today, with highs rising up to 7 degrees. Temperatures will return back to the average temperatures for this time of year. The atmosphere is drying up as cold and dry winds blow. In most parts of the country, dry weather warnings and advisories are in place. As strong winds of around 50 meters per second will blow, please be careful not to cause any wildfires. Tomorrow, Chuncheon will start off at -7 degrees and Gyeongju at -3. Daytime temperatures will rise up to around 10 degrees in most parts of the country. Daejeon and Gyeongju will move up to 9 degrees. It will reach 11 degrees in Daegu. From the second half of the week, the weather will get warmer. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.